All right, and we are live. I am joined by Dakota J. Miller today, and I'm going to do a quick introduction. So, Dakota J. Miller is an emerging voice in horror fiction with the upcoming, the current release of his debut novel, The Curses We Keep. He's a U.S. Army veteran with a PhD in health science. He brings a distinctive perspective to his, which brings a distinctive perspective to his writing. When he's not working, he is preoccupied with unraveling the human condition. Sounds familiar? A fixation on that seeps into every page he writes. He's raised in the Carolinas and shaped by military moves across the country. He now pours his southern roots into dark, psychologically charged tales. Beyond his debut, which we are talking about, and I'm going to give him the opportunity to introduce today. Dakota has written short story tome in which characters will be seamlessly interwoven into his upcoming novel Moon Goddess by Faye Holiday, releasing in early 2026. Uh, though new to fiction, Dakota writes with a voice that we thought we'd lost and one that we desperately need back. So that was my wonderfully read introduction. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Dakota to go ahead and introduce what we are talking about today, which is the book, or the release of the book, The Curses We Keep.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, so today is the release of The Curses We Keep. It is a Southern Gothic horror that is heavily inspired by works of Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Bronte, Washington Irving, and the likes. It is based on trying to reach back through time and pluck a classic out. Not saying that my writing is anywhere near the likes of the legends that we all aspire to be like, but the goal of this specific book and the tone was to make it feel like it was something produced in that era in the 19th century.
Awesome. So I know that you had this one. I I believe this one's, I don't know if is it novel length or novella length. I believe it was shorter, right?
It's technically novella length. It was originally
Okay.
novel length, and due to the writing style, my editor and multiple beta readers told me to cut it down. So it was originally 65,000 words. I've cut it down to 32,000. So it's there's this interesting effect to where the story feels both fast and slow because the writing style that I went with, you have all this prose and descriptors that I was very made aware of, or aware of when I wrote it. And so it's very pulls you in, it's very magnetic, and then the story kind of goes off pretty quickly.
All right. So talk to me about, well, I don't know much about your journey as far as how you decided to actually go ahead and write something. Like what inspired you to say, I'm actually going to put, you know, hands to keyboard, pen to paper, whatever it is, and write. Was there something that inspired that?
Yes, so originally I was struggling to understand human psychology. I wanted to understand why we do the things that we do. And so I wanted to kind of write a story and have different characters and not have plot armor and just see how they interact with one another. And when I did that, this story kind of emerged, and it was a combination of a few things. It was the idea that I talked about understanding human psychology. That was actually happening around the time that I visited Salem, and when I go and travel to different places, I like to read books based in those places. I'm partial to classical fiction or just classical literature in general. So I was looking for something classical like Dracula or Frankenstein, and I couldn't find it. And so I thought, how cool would this be? So I was watching The Witch, which is heavily inspired my story, and I all the pieces just kind of aligned. So when I originally wrote the characters were too smart for the story and there was no plot. They just all figured it out. So then I had to go into and figure out, well, how do they know this? They can't just infer it through osmosis. They have to think. And so I kind of was inspired to understand why people do what they do, and the conclusion I came to is essentially um, a zebra doesn't really change their stripes.
So I'm hearing I'm hearing a few things there. So I'm hearing that one, you your probably the choice of style comes from your particular attraction to kind of classical literature or that type of older style prose. I'm hearing that okay, you went to Salem, so you got to go to a place, or maybe I imagine I have not been to Salem, so I can't say what it's like there, but I imagine there's historic. I've been other places with historical significance, so there's a lot of leaning into that particular history that a lot of those places do, or that you can kind of immerse yourself into, which probably it sounds like it stirred some ideas of maybe telling a story like that, or I guess correct me if I'm wrong. Was it the inspiration was because while you were there, you were not finding something that really spoke to you as far as written about it, or was it more of an inspiration to be like, this is kind of an interesting idea with the witchcraft and this time period that kind of drew you to it?
The former, it was going there, and I was very frustrated that I could not find anything, any kind of classical literature. We have so many stories on witchcraft, but yet there's no single famous work that I could find. I mean, there's plenty of witch stories, but nothing compared to the style that I was aiming for.
Got
And
it.
so um, it's actually interesting whenever I wrote this and then the other story that you mentioned in the introduction, the two styles are completely different. Someone was criticizing me online and saying, "Oh, your style shouldn't be that different. That means bad writing." I was like, "No, no, no. This is something that I'm doing for the art, and the story is just kind of taking a shape of its own. It needs to sound like it's plucked from 200 years ago. That's kind of what I'm going for." And then also, the story is a meta commentary on what makes one a witch. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Crucible and the witch trials in general, but it became just a witch hunt as to profit from people that you disliked. And
Yeah.
so, what exactly makes one a witch? The definition would be someone who sells their soul to the devil. And then it kind of leans into the philosophy of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's kind of pulling back the layers as to see why people do what they do. Um, can we change who we are? And kind of a commentary on society and the witch story as a whole.
Okay, so we had a desire to find this type of classic piece that didn't exist, so we're trying to create it. And then there's also this piece that you're expressing where you have a interest in exploring human psychology, which I can highly relate to. Um, where you're trying to understand maybe the origin. Is it like for you when you're creating the character, when you're characters, when you're creating the story? Is it like a an exercise in putting yourself in somebody else's head? Is it like how do you craft or how do you explore that human psychology, if you can think to how to explain this, through the story itself? Like how does that give you what you're looking for?
So I have an answer that comes to mind, and it's going to sound extremely conceited. Um, but I feel like this would be an answer a lot of us would have. I could not put myself in the minds of my character because everything was solved too quickly. That's not to say that I'm some genius that can just solve everything. I'm horrible with puzzles. It's to say when I have the objective bird eye view of everything going on, and then I am put in the characters, I just see everything. And so I just go, oh, well, why do they need to do this? They could just do this. And it kind of becomes like an exercise in pretending to be Sherlock Holmes. What I did was is I tried to get characters. So originally all the characters were just too smart. They didn't really differentiate from each other. So I had to figure out a way to make them separate. And this was the first time I ever did that. So what I did and what helped me was I based them on Greek gods. And
Okay.
that was their archetype. So the the one that is the most closest to a Greek god is Ernest. He's the father, and he's like Poseidon. So he's a bit temperamental, but he's gruff. He's a sailor, and I just try to put all of that into him. So he he is a bit untrusting of people, and so when once I did that, that was kind of the key. And so I based them on everything, and then to me, it was kind of like chess. So you have different pieces that do different things, and they have to do something within the realm that matches this thing. So for one character, he's the pastor. He's extremely smart. He might be one of the smartest characters, but they're all smart, I feel like. And he talks to the local natives, and he just thinks they're crazy because it's kind of his prejudice of, oh, these natives are just crazy people. And the natives don't trust the settlers because why on earth would they? So you have all these pieces of people that are intelligent, but they don't quite know the full pieces of the puzzle. And something I play with a lot in the book is red herrings. So, and I call it red herrings, but it's all the same thing, but you only have a piece. So for example, um, as you can probably tell from the cover, it's a story based on a witch, but the natives see it and they don't know what a witch is. That's not in their lore, but they think it's a wendigo. And so they're like, oh, this is what a wendigo does, so it must be a wendigo. And then the seller's like, oh, no, this is a witch because this is what we know. So they don't have all the pieces. So for me, it was trying to, I guess, blind myself and find human flaws without overdoing it. Of this character, for example, with the Salem witch trials, an issue that I had was how little evidence we needed to kill somebody. And this, obviously, they're fearful, but I didn't want to repeat the same thing, so I don't let them kill the witch until they see her as a witch. And so to me, it's like, oh, um, I just saw a witch appear. You're clearly a witch. I'm going to kill you now. Like that's what I have to do. And so I tried to make it that way, and it was really difficult because I'm very logical and think logically. So the easiest way for me was to put prejudice in the way, and therefore it's harder to think when you don't trust someone just due to who they are, how they look. If that
Interesting.
answers your
So,
question.
no, it sounds like for you, it was an exercise in kind of exploring how a different mind might get to a different result. So it sounds like you started with the idea of an archetype. So you used your Greek gods to build an archetype that is not you or separate from how you think, and then followed that in your own logical way forward to be like, okay, if you are this type of person, like how do you kind of follow the threads and get
Yes,
to where you're getting. I think there's I can see similarities as far as like how I like to craft character. Now, I'm curious, this is a more of a historical type piece, and I don't have a lot of folks on here. I've had a few people on here that have done like historical fiction. So they've talked about some of the research that they've had to do in order to create their world or their story. So did you find you had to do a lot of research in order to create a realistic setting and how people would have interacted or lived in the time period that you're trying to convey?
that's the number one question that I always get, and I'm always disappointed to say that no, I virtually did no research. So with this story, I wrote it in an area that I'm familiar with. It's set in Charleston. I know the cover says it. Technically, it would be named Charlestown, but I can't remember if I even mentioned it in the book. But anyways, it's set in Charleston, and so I'm familiar with the area. I knew the vibe that I was going for just with the atmosphere and from the books I read, but I wanted to give it a southern twang, so to speak. And then I was familiar with New England witch folklore. And so the research I did was just kind of over the years, just picking this stuff up. I will say, however, um, so I do have Native Americans in my story, and I reached out to a descendant of the tribe they're based on, and I had her read it and do a sensitivity reading. I was like, hey, like, there is some racism in this book, but it's accurate to the time, but I want to be respectful. Is this accurate to how these natives in this tribe would have been? And she worked with an expert. She's very involved with the tribe. She said, I don't see any issues. Um, so she approved it, and something I wanted her to do, and she didn't have a chance to do it for this. I'm planning to get it done when I release a Lux edition, but I want her to provide an authentic translation of some lines. Um, Something, and anyone who's read it, and this isn't too much of a spoiler, but I think this might be kind of funny. There is a So the natives and settlers do not trust each other, which is pretty accurate from my understanding. I wouldn't know, I didn't research it. But uh, the settlers get stuck and the natives help them. And the only one that can speak English is the chief's daughter. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, you guys can stay." And the chief is just like saying something in his language. She's like, "Yeah, he said you can stay." And if you can read between the lines, he's not cool with it. He's like, "They've got to go. We don't want the whites here." And she's just such a good character. She's just like, "Oh no, you can stay." And he's not happy, but she's showing her leadership abilities. Um, and so what I want is in that authentic language of him being like, "Yeah, no, this isn't cool." And her going, "Yeah, it's fine." So anyone in
These
that tribe, if
translations.
yeah, if they end up translating it, they could be like, "That is hilarious." And, just to kind of honor the tribe.
Yeah, it's interesting and it makes a lot of sense to me. I know that like the anti-wokey, right? Like, oh, sensitivity reading. But to me, it's like, if, especially if you haven't done like extensive research to try and make sure that you're representing the relationships there in an accurate way, the history there in an accurate way for something that you really don't know much about, it makes sense to consult with somebody who might know something about it.
Exactly. And I know like um the general, I guess, stereotypes of the Native Americans we see in movies, and I didn't want to do that. So when I first wrote the my first draft, it's like these feel like kind of generic. What can I do to make them stand out? And like, "Oh no, you got it kind of spot on." I was like, "Really? Well, if you're saying yes, I'll take that as a win."
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm curious to for more timeline. Like I don't think I have an idea. My goodness, I have like this gunk in my throat, which is going to make talking
Me
fun.
too.
So,
Me too.
but when did you start writing this book, and how long did it take you to get the first draft done?
So I think I started writing this in spring of 2022.
Okay.
Um, and I would not recommend any aspiring authors to do what I did. I didn't have my first draft done until last spring, so it took 2 years for the first draft, and it took so long because I did it when I procrastinated on my dissertation. So I wrote a dissertation simultaneously with this book, and it was so funny. I would get in so much trouble with my wife. She's like, "You need to work on this." I'm like, "Yeah, but writing an APA for a decade, I just wanted to write something I could control and do whatever I wanted with." So um, I would write in spurts. Um, I guess from college, just writing on the weekends, so I could spend a weekend cranking out 10,000 words easy, and
Mhm.
then I would just go back and what I would do is so. And I don't know if anyone else does this, but this really worked for me. I started with my outline, and then I would start like, this is plan A, this is point A, I need to get to B, but what's all this middle ground? And so I would write a sentence or maybe a paragraph writing out the plot, or not the plot, the scene. And then I'd go, well, how do I get here to here? And then I would might get stuck, so I would just take a month and I would just start thinking about it while I'm driving, walking, whatever, and then it would click, and so then I would write another little bit, and then once you kind of get the whole plot written out, you could easily just start adding all the details in. And so that took me about 2 years to do. So I finished my first draft last spring, excuse me, and then I spent, ever since, I would say, May of last year, I've been just seeing it to editors, beta readers, just revisions. It hasn't been too many changes either. The biggest change was just taking out all the stuff. I think I went a little too Edgar Allan Poe, and my editor, she gave me great advice, and she said there's a reason he didn't write books. Um, if you do this, people will be miserable reading it. And so people loved it. They're like, yeah, but this is kind of hard. Can you just shorten it? So I cut it out. So, but yeah, long answer short, 2 years.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I mean, in a way, it's well, probably procrastinating on your dissertation is probably not the best thing in the world, but like it does speak to you know you can inch away at these types of things. Like if you say I'm going to write a book, you can make if you can make solid progress. It can be slower progress, and you can get somewhere as long as you're actually writing. So okay, so you took about 2 years to get the draft. You're mentioning that you went through beta readers and you went through an editor and you did that process. I know for a while you had this available for folks to read prior to actually formally releasing it. So,
Mhm.
what was the decision to try? And was that just to get more, like, I don't want to say like informal beta readers, or what was the decision to try that?
It was both. It was mainly to get exposure, if I'd have to say that.
Okay.
I wanted some advice from anyone who would be willing to read it, but I had the idea that, hey, if I give this away for free, and at first it was just I would email it to people, and then I got the idea to get a link tree, and so if you wanted it for free, go to the link tree, and then I got your email, and so that would just put you on an email list that I've put people on. So now that I'm releasing it or up to releasing it, I would just email them weekly, and like, hey, I'm pre-ordering it. Some people unsubscribe, that's fine, it doesn't bother me, but I got about 50 people on my email list that I was able to just email directly and go, hey, if you enjoyed it, then I would love your support. If not, that's fine. Take yourself off the list. So I got people to, it got spread by word of mouth because people were sending it to each other for free. It got emails, and I was just able to kind of get, I guess, a small fan base. I will say, moving forward, I don't know if I would send out a full free copy, but on this time, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to get eyes on, and it kind of worked. Out of 50 people, I had 23 pre-orders. So.
Yeah, you did pretty good. I saw that, and that's phenomenally great, especially for a a first time author. So you did good getting the pre-orders, building that pipeline for getting people to buy the book. So I'm curious as far as I like to ask more process related questions. So you wrote your draft, you got some feedback from people, you went through a series of revisions. When did you decide that like okay, this is it, this is the final product?
So I would say whenever I met my editor, because I had gone through an editor prior,
Mhm.
and they were decent, but then I sent it to my editor, and I wasn't sure, and I was torn on this one spot. It was the probably the beginning of the last act. Someone's burned at the stake, and I just could not figure out how to transition it. And it was the easiest thing, and it was a soup sandwich. And she was like, just start talking about how they feel. And I think maybe because I wrote it and I was feeling the emotion they were feeling, and I was like, oh my gosh, someone just died. And I just could not write it. And then I sent it to her. I was like, I just need help with this one thing and then editing the rest of it if you can do that. And she sent back, and I was like, and she gave an analysis, and she's like, this is pretty good. She was like, and that so then after that, because I took a lot out, I asked some people who beta read it. I asked her, I asked a bunch of people who I knew read it. I said, this is what I'm thinking of adding. I want to do this, 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 and this, kind of give some backstory. And everyone said no. It's perfect the way it is. It's a good story. Don't ruin it by adding this. I was like, well, it doesn't answer all the questions. It doesn't have this. And everybody said, no, it's good. So that, and then that happened at the same time. Before the illustrator I have now, I was talking to someone about illustrating for me, and she read it just to kind of understand the story, and she said it was amazing as well. So kind of getting all this feedback back to back. Saying that, toot my own horn, this is a very polarizing book. You
I
seem
was
to
about
either
to
love
ask
it or
about
hate it.
that. Yeah.
So I have gotten feedback from people saying that it's the worst thing that they've ever read. It's a piece of crap. I don't know what I'm doing, which is true. I don't know what I'm doing. But I've also gotten people coming back saying it's phenomenal. They love it. They really wish that there was more books like this out there. And so I've kind of filtered out the feedback because I've noticed a pattern, and the pattern doesn't stick to this. Um, strictly, but it's something that I've noticed. And depending on what you enjoy to read, if you enjoy reading the classics, you'll most likely enjoy this book because you'll see the homage I'm trying to do, the honor I'm giving to the classics. If you don't enjoy the classics and you just read smut, which is fine, it's free country, you probably won't like this book. So that's kind of the duality I've found.
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of targeting. You can learn a lot from the negative feedback about who your audience really is and how to tailor that messaging or marketing. So yeah,
Uh,
it's interesting. Did you ever actually have like any? Was the negative feedback that you got? Did it come from beta readers or did it come from like the people that joined and got the free copy?
The people that joined and got the free copy, they would say, "Hey, if you're open to feedback, I'd love to give some." And I'm always open to feedback. And it was stuff that I strongly disagree with, and I don't think they're getting it. I got some feedback that I should name a tree because how do they understand the story if I don't name a tree? Just so you and everyone watching knows, the tree doesn't have much significance besides being a tree. Like it's, someone was upset that I didn't. I had Spanish moss in it because Spanish moss isn't everywhere in the world, so therefore I'm excluding people who aren't familiar with Spanish moss. I got feedback at the very beginning in I think chapter one. It says the air is still, but the trees um, were dancing, and they're like, well, this doesn't make any sense because the wind is still. And I was like, exactly, like that's I wrote that to be creepy. Like, why is a
Yeah.
tree moving if there's no wind? And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, well, it might not be for you. That's fine. So, and the other feedback I get whenever I was talking earlier about how it's both fast and slow, I've gotten feedback, negative feedback that says this story is too fast. And then I've got feedback that's too slow. The story is only 32,000 words. I've had people tell me I need to take out 90,000 of those words. Wait, no, not 90,000, 90% of those words because it doesn't make sense. And I'm just like, I've had other people complain that it's nothing but purple prose, and they're like, "Oh, classical new author mistake, purple prose." What's funny to kind of tell how I write? Well, I guess this is too different. If you end up reading Moon Goddess by Faye Holiday and you see my parts are very, very different from this. There's no purple prose. It's just a story where the character's saying. Um, this was meant to feel like, again, an older style. So some people say they get it, but the people that are hating on it that I've spoken to, there's only one that I know that said they're like, I really love the idea for the story. I love what you're trying to do. It just didn't land with me. And you know what? I That's fine. Everybody's gonna like it. But other than that, it's either a love or hate.
That's interesting. I'm curious. So you've mentioned a couple times now this idea that you have the two your this book and then this other one that you're working on, they're different and they're written differently. I understand that okay, this one was specifically trying to emulate older work or to fill something that you were looking to fill. But you've mentioned that you like the classics. So what was so help me understand the choice for this other thing that you're working on where you're not um, writing in the same style, I guess.
Oh yeah, so Faye had this thing where on her website where she was offering if you answer some questions, she'll make a character based off your personality. And I just couldn't sleep one night and I ended up stumbling upon it. I was like, oh cool, I'll do this. And so she made a character and she was like, yeah. Faye ended up being a tremendous help in with my work. She gave me some ideas. She's very well versed in Native Americans as well, and so she just kind of it's like, hey, I would probably change this up and this to make it a bit more authentic. So she really helped, and she gave a ton of advice. Afterwards, she was like, hey, would you be up for just writing a short story back as a favor? And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. So um, I sat on it for a few months because I didn't want to be one of those people who just returns a favor with something half done. So I sat on it, and then it one afternoon it came to me, and I just wrote the entire 10 chapter short story for her in my own voice. Um, I just I I'm familiar with her works. I've read her work, and but she didn't really tell me much about the plot moving forward. She just kind of told me some of the rules, this and that, but she kept everything close to the chest. And so I was like, I'm just going to try to write as much as my own voice as I can, and then you can make whatever changes you need to for your book. And so if you read it, it sounds like me. A buddy of mine read it, says it sounds like J.K. Rowling. I guess I sound like J.K. Rowling. But um, it's very much my voice and how I would tell a story. And so that was very easy because again, I could just knock it out quick. Um, but I I was trying to make it universal to the style that she needs to tell. And so I figured if she likes how I write and she just likes my voice, and I can write like that. But she's not writing a classic type book, if that makes sense. So I was trying to make my book sound very much like other authors, which was very difficult because I'm not them.
Got it. So I feel like I'm missing some degree of detail there as far as what
Uh,
this new project is, as far as so it sounds like it's a collaboration with another.
yes, yes, it's a collaboration. I apologize.
Got
Yeah,
it.
so it's her book. It's she's doing a series, and so she wrote the book, and then I just collaborated with her, and um I wrote a few chapters.
Excellent. Okay. That makes more sense. I was like, okay, I think I'm missing something. We're missing a
Oh
piece.
yeah, yeah, no, I apologize.
It's all
So
right. We'll get to the root of it. Awesome. So yeah, that's interesting. So intentionality versus like a natural voice um,
yes.
being the main difference there. Which do you prefer as far as writing?
So as of writing, I prefer a bit of a mix. So I don't know if all authors do this, but I find weird things in scenes whenever I'm setting them up. So for example, writing a scene in my book, I it's a very stressful time. So I wrote it how I would experience a tsunami if I was in front of a tsunami. So the tension is rising, and then I just kind of wrote it in that way. And with me trying to sound like Poe, I tried to make it sound more lyrical.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best word. And but I do the same. So when I was writing, there was this collaboration. I was setting a scene, and it just starts out in the forest, and I wrote it like a concert. Um, you hear the fire crackles, you hear the frogs hum or croak, you hear the bugs, and so it kind of makes this crescendo. And so with both ways, I think my favorite is a happy medium between the two. With if I'm writing in just my voice, I'm a bit self-conscious that my voice isn't elegant enough. If I write in trying to mimic another's voice, I'm self-conscious it doesn't sound right. But if I slightly try to elevate my own voice and strive to sound better, then that's the happy medium for me. So when I plan to work on a sequel to The Curses We Keep, I'm planning on less of trying to mimic and trying to use that elevation. And I think it'll be a good middle ground.
So when you're thinking about like creating a more lyrical prose, are you using things like reading it out loud? Like how do you hear the music and the words? Is it just reading it back to yourself?
So what I do, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this won't like it, but I will read it out loud. But when I read my own voice, I don't exactly hear what you may hear when I talk. And it's gotten me into more trouble than I'd like. So what I actually did originally is I used the app Speechify, put my work into it, and then I had the AI and Speechify read it back to me. And obviously, it's not a person, so it doesn't get it right. But I would listen to it and I would go, okay, how does this sound? And then some words, like some sentences, would just sound weird. And again, it's AI, but it's kind of beneficial because it's not too human. So you're still getting that kind of robotic. So you should still kind of hear something. There should be a kind of pattern. And so I'm just kind of thinking, okay, how does this sound? So, like I was saying earlier, um, if I'm writing a scene and there's tension, it's not just that there's a bucket that someone tripped over and there's a fire that's sparking. You have to me, it's you start small and you build it up like a tidal wave. Or there's a scene that I wrote in the collaboration that I can't talk specifics, but you start small and then you kind of get glimpses of things, and then it kind of forms a picture, a very horrific picture. And so I guess for me, it's about finding that balance of what sounds lyrical in the sense of do I feel the same? Because plenty of authors can go, oh yeah, the grass is green and then they can go over and it's like, oh, the dew on the grass was so green as it poked into the bottoms of my feet. And it's like, okay, that sounds good, but then what are you doing? And so it's like, I don't know, the chill of the wind cooled my toes as I don't know, I'm getting too pretentious
Makes
now,
sense.
trying too
Yeah.
hard. But you say it, and then whenever you listen back to it, you can, to me at least, I can hear, does that sound pretentious? Does it sound too simple? Does it sound, what am I trying to get? And so the goal for the curses we keep is to make it sound suffocating, to make it sound as if the atmosphere is its own character.
Awesome. Yeah. So I don't mind that because I'm a very audio person and I actually do the same thing. Everything I have goes through Speechify over and over and over again because I'm listening to the. I'm trying to hear the sound in the word, and it also helps you catch all those stupid things like, oh, I wrote of instead of for some reason.
Oh,
So
after I submitted my final draft, so I did final revisions. I pulled an all-nighter. I think I submitted it at like 3 a.m., maybe even later or earlier, however you look at it. I caught the dumbest mistake and I left it in the final draft so everyone can laugh at me. And you might get a kick out of this. I said the owl hooed, but then when I looked it up,
food.
it's hooted. And I was like, "Are you serious? Is that?" And I was just half asleep, and I was like, "Well, they're going to call me out on that one."
It's gonna go in. It's going live. Yeah, I have a not currently released my paperback version of my book yet. That I just came out because I have not listened through all of it. I have an audiobook that I like listen to the audiobook and I read at the same
Yep.
time to try and catch things, but I'll catch stuff. Um, yeah, I haven't done that all. I've not. I don't have time, so it's just slow on the back burner right now. But yeah, I'm
Any
like
idea when it'll come
I'll
out?
catch. So the paperback, God, I hope it's this month. Finish it. I need to get the like I'm tired, man. I'm tired, boss. I need I need a break. Uh, but yeah, I'm on like I think I'm on chapter 20 now of 32, so it should be not that much more.
Okay. No, I've done the same thing. It really helps to listen to someone else reading it while you're reading along, and then you're like, "I wrote that," and it's miserable after the first draft too because you're like, "Ugh, I thought this was great."
Yeah, this is supposed to be like that's awkward phrasing. But
I
I
actually,
try and catch that stuff.
I had one paragraph. It was actually one of the first paragraphs I wrote, and I just ended up taking it out, and I hated it. But it started in third person and transitioned to first person in the paragraph, and it was about fantasizing about. Essentially, the paragraph came down to Eve, Adam and Eve, and how Eve was um, tempted into power. And so it was one of my characters talking about it, and she was just thinking about it, and then it became first person, and it just felt too weird to keep in. And I was really proud of it. And then when I would hear it read back to me, I was like, this sounds awful.
Sometimes it reads better than it actually once you actually hear it. So yeah, that's a real thing. So did you I'm curious as far as like format you mentioned you had an artist that did the cover work or your illustrations for you. Um for formatting this, did you use any special programs or anything to get it formatted, or are you formatting in Word?
So I was in Word, and then I just watched a YouTube video on how to format it, and then I actually sent it to a friend who put it in, I believe, Atticus,
Okay.
and he actually ended up formatting the final version for me. And I met him on Twitter. I don't know if he wants me to say his name or not, but I've thanked him multiple times, um, publicly. I just happy to say his name, but I don't want to. So, anyways, um, he was like, "Yeah, no, I can put this in Atticus and do this," and he's really helped me out.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine.
so he and it took I like an hour, I think, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, there's a few errors in here that I'll fix." I'm like, "Oh, thank you," and because I've just before that point I was just doing Word, and then I formatted myself, made it a PDF, and then I just sent it, and he's like, "No, Atticus will help."
So, do you have any current projects that you're working on right now as far as like you mentioned a sequel, wanting to do a sequel to this?
So no, besides Moon Goddess, that'll come out next month that I worked on. The sequel, all the work is happening in my head right now. I've been too busy at work to start writing. I really want to start writing because this won't become a series or anything. The only reason I'm writing a sequel is because after some beta readers read it, they were like, "Oh, what happens to this and this?" Because I left some loose ends on purpose. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's part of the story you don't find out." And like, we want to know. So originally, I was going to incorporate that part of the story in this one, but thematically, it just didn't match. And so, after speaking to my editor and some friends, we all decided it would be better if the second half of the story is a sequel and it has its own um, theme and story that's separate. So it takes place right after the events. It has the same characters, but this story is more of I explained it the other day to someone. It's like the movie Alien and Aliens. Alien is a very claustrophobic, slow-moving movie. And then Aliens, you still have the horror, but it just pumps it up to an 11 in terms
Got
of
it.
action and everything. So this is a very feminine story, and the sequel will be very masculine. So my goal is work is slowing down for this month before it picks back up. I'm hoping I can start at least writing the outline and getting it out of my head. And but I already know how it starts, I know how it ends, I know the events that take place in the middle. The only thing I can't narrow down is one character, what I want them to do. So I figured I'll figure that out while I'm writing it.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to give you an opportunity, if you would like to go ahead and read a little bit from The Curses We
Oh,
Keep.
perfect. Let's see. Would you like something from the beginning, from the end?
That's up to you. You're
Okay.
trying to sell it, so whatever you think is
Let me see here. I think I did this the other day, so it shouldn't have anything. Kind of gets you right into the action. Um, oh, it's not that chapter. All right. How long do you want this to be?
that's also up to you.
In that
But
case, I will
I may
just.
stop you. You're not going to read the whole book.
Oh, I wouldn't want to. All right. In that case, I'll just do the prologue. It's
Perfect.
like 3.5 pages. I think that's the shortest one. But if it's too long, stop
That's
me.
fine.
All right. I'm not a narrator. I'm hiring a narrator for the audio version. So,
And he froze. question
jagged,
is,
and skeletal. Oh, can you hear me?
okay, you froze, so I don't know if it was
Oh,
me or you, but you can start again.
it's not you, it's me.
Excellent.
Okay. The woods lay silent, a black mouth swallowing sound. Pines stood jagged and skeletal against the sky bruised with dusk, their branches reaching upward as though clawing for the last veins of light. Spanish moss hung in long gray shrouds that swayed in the still air, heavy with damp. Drops fell slow to the earth, each bead glinting like a tear suspended in its fall before breaking the mud with a soft patter. The rhythm drummed through her skull as if the forest itself possessed a pulse. Thickened air, sharp with resin, and the sour rot of leaves half swallowed by the earth. Their decay whispered beneath their feet, a slow gurgle winding through the quiet curling into her lungs until she breathed the forest's sickness. Roots jutted from the soil, slick with moisture, glistening as though the land itself bled. Strips of bark peeled away and caught the faint wind that moaned through the trees, a thin sound that climbed her spine and urged her deeper. The old hag moved with care, her steps halting, her weight dragging in the mud. The cloak about her shoulders hung heavy, its hem soaked and torn by thorns. Each rip made a small sound, a sigh against the wind. Behind her trailed a rope, coarse hemp, thick and frayed. It rasped over the ground as it followed, taken from a wagon long ago, once reins guided by a hand she had loved. What was a lifeline then had become a burden, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. Her breath came in shallow bursts, pale wisp, trembling in the cold. Her chest ached beneath the weight of the air. She had entered the wood where the frost still lingered, and the river's murmur around through the trees like a warning. Moss brushed her face, damp and cold as a dead hand urging her back. But she pressed on, stumbling over roots that caught her boots and clawed her ankles. Mud sucked at the soles with greedy lips. Each step drew her deeper, as if the forest bent to watch. The rope snagged, caught fast in a root's grip, and jerked her backwards. She stumbled, her arms shuddering from the strain. Mud clung to the hemp, dark and thick, and the weight of it sank into her gut. She freed it with trembling hands. Her fingers were gnarled and cracked, her nails rimmed with dirt. She tugged the rope loose, and it rasped wetly against the bark. The sound reminded her of her own pulse. Her face was a map of years carved by grief and sun. Beneath her thin skin and bones jutted, her color bleached by time and cold. She lifted her hands before her, turning them in the dim light. Once she had been small and sure, deft with the reins, steady in their work. She remembered the child's hands that had learned knots at the father's side, the young woman's hands that had tied rope in defiance, the mother's hands that had reached toward flames and found only smoke. Those memories blurred together until they belonged to no one she knew. Now her fingers shook, dragging the rope behind her through the muck while the forest closed in, its shadows withering like breath. I can finish there if you'd like. That's only halfway through the prologue.
That's beautiful. I have to say, I like it.
Thank you.
I don't find that to be overly purple, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I will say, so it's kind of funny. The prologue is one of my favorite things that I wrote in the entire book. I think it breaks it down to exactly the core of the story, the atmosphere, everything. But under that, and what not everyone catches, I didn't read the prologue because I didn't want everyone to have to suffer through that. But the entire prologue is literal, but it's also a metaphor. So she's dragging a rope, but if you've ever carried a rope, usually you you have it and then you just kind of carry it here. She's not doing that. She's pulling a entire 30-foot rope behind her, and it's getting caught and caked in mud. So the rope itself is a literal metaphor of the guilt she possesses. And so the further that we see her travel in this short prologue, the more than we see her guilt manifest in simply the rope as it catches the mud itself. Um, Not sure if everyone gets it, but it was probably one of my favorite things to write because while everything else has layers and arcs throughout the entire story, this right here is just kind of within its own prologue. It has everything. Um, so
Yeah, I like that. So, with that, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a pitch for where people can find you, where they can buy the book, how they can follow you, get more information, anything like that.
yeah, of course. So I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty active. My handle is Miller Dakota J. But if you just type in my name, I'm pretty sure I'll show up. I have a link to my link tree that has a place to buy my book. But if you would like to know, I have ebook and paperback available on Amazon. And then D2D has my ebook available pretty much every major store. So it's on Apple, um, I think Barnes and Noble, uh, a bunch of other stuff, but I usually hear everyone gets on Amazon. Um, I'm working on paperbacks for D2D as well, but there's that. So if you can find my profile, I have it in my link. I have my reviews up. I have me, everything. I'm pretty active. I will let everyone know that I'm currently working on a special edition. So I think you saw it earlier, but I'm working with an illustrator and I just actually ordered the first proof of copy. So it's going to be very expensive. I'm only doing 25 of them. And if that does good, then I can get more for anyone else. But each chapter will have an illustration by the same person who did the cover. Uh, the pages will be black, and the entire book should be uh, premium. So it's going to be a work of art. So whether you like the book or not, it will look good on your bookshelf.
That's cool. I like that. I've wanted to do something like that myself, but have not. So
I
good.
will say it's funny. So the proof of copy that I'm ordering, this is just me ordering the book with shipping is $50. And
Yeah.
so someone was telling me, they're like, "Oh, well, that's expensive for a novella." And I was like, "Well, it'd be more expensive for a novel. Like they charge you by the page."
Yep.
So that's not something that I'm doing. That is simply the cost of manufacturing. And so whenever I sell it, I would have to include not only that cost, but shipping costs for me and everything else. So, but anyways, if that's down the road, hopefully this October that'll be released. But as of right now, The Curse We Keep is available on Amazon and ebook and paperback.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dakota, for coming on. I'm excited that you got your book out there into the world for money, money. Hopefully, you get some reward for your efforts put in. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you, everybody, for coming on and joining us.